Hello. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yeah, we're okay.
Okay. All right. This is an open training. Any FutureFeed users can come to this training. So there are multiple organizations on this call today. Looks like we have a fairly small group. And I'm just going to get started and jump right in.
I have a question.
This session is, I'm sorry, say again?
Well, my question is, are we getting a copy of these slides later on, or?
I'm sharing my screen right now and I'm logged into FutureFeed. So if you
Okay,
log into your environment and navigate along with me, this
got
session is
it.
being recorded though. So after I end the call, it takes an hour, hour and a half and for the video to process, and then you'll get a link to the recording so you can watch that again if you'd like.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Mhm. My name is Rachel Leidy, and I am the Director of Compliance Education here at FutureFeed, and I also lead most of the training sessions. Um, so I am logged into FutureFeed, and this is end user training session number 1. There are 2 sessions, so I'm going to cover kind of the first half of the tool. And the second session, I will finish addressing and covering the rest of the tool's capabilities. The way we designed our training, the 2 sessions, training 1 and training 2, is we are training following our recommended approach for populating the tool and getting the tool set up and started for you to manage compliance and prepare for your assessment. Um, I'm gonna just briefly kind of cover the training outline and our recommended approach for populating FutureFeed. So this session here, we're gonna review the dashboard area together and just talk about the different pages and sections in the dashboard and how you use that area. And then we'll move on to review the start section of FutureFeed. In here, you're providing, as you can see, a lot of company information, high level compliance management information. You're defining your scope, the contracts your company has, cage codes, as well as the type of data you're trying to protect. That's in the start area. And we titled it Start because this is where we recommend starting. Um, as far as like when you first get access to your FutureFeed and your environment, everything's going to be empty. So you'll have to start populating the data and setting it up for compliance management. And we recommend addressing these data fields first. Okay. And we'll go over the each section together. So after you're done filling out and populating the start area FutureFeed, then we recommend moving on to people. Okay, we recommend just starting to the left or on the left of this menu bar here and stop, uh, they refer to these as subway stops. So stopping at each subway stop along the menu, and then after you've populated each section of FutureFeed, you should be pretty well set up to start managing compliance in the tool. Okay, so after you've populate start, then go on to people and define your users, roles, and teams involved with implementing these requirements and maintaining that compliance throughout the system lifecycle or the contract lifecycle. All throughout FutureFeed, you can assign responsibility to individuals, roles, or teams, okay? So, for example, in under one requirement, you can identify all of the people responsible for implementing this requirement and enforcing it, all of the people accountable, consulted, informed. So we use the RACI model all throughout FutureFeed. And for each requirement or each control, you identify roles and teams involved and their level of involvement using the RACI model. Under our documents, same thing for documents and tools. Okay, you have the RACI model again for assignment of responsibility. So right here, as you could see, if I wanted to assign a team as responsible for this policy, you could do that. Um, Click on this little image here and you can assign individual persons or, people if you don't want to assign a team. And then in some places you can assign roles. Okay, so if you want to be able to assign someone or a team or a role at your company as responsible, accountable, consulted, or informed for any tools, documents, or the requirements, then you'll have to define them first here under people. So that's why we recommend moving on to this section so you can start defining the people involved with your compliance program, whether it's internal or external. And then after you define those people, moving on to tools. And so you could start logging your technology and logging the assets, assigning responsibility. Then over after you're done logging your tools, we recommend moving on to documents and assigning responsibility. After you've filled out tools and documents, then we recommend you move on to the assess page where you start doing an internal assessment or an internal evaluation of the requirements and start connecting the requirements to the appropriate documents as evidence and connecting the requirements to the appropriate technology, meaning that technology is implementing or um, is implementing or enforcing that requirement in your environment or implements that requirement on, in itself. Uh, so after you're done doing the assessment and, associating technology and evidence with the requirements, then we recommend moving on to the system security plan where you can review your system security plan and edit the data, or you can get an idea of where you're missing some information or you have some gaps. So this SSP area here, most of the data that's presented here is captured elsewhere in the tool, but the tool is designed to generate for you automatically this system security plan in the background as you're populating the people, tools, documents, the start area, and the assess area. These 5 sections here all feed in and populate your SSP. So once you get here, you're just reviewing and approving your SSP or identifying where you have some gaps or you need to provide some more information. Then after your SSP, we recommend checking out your system POEM, okay? As you were entering tools or documents, you could have put them on your system POEM, meaning that document is not yet approved, you're still working on it, it's in draft, not enforced, or for tools, if you put, maybe you're planning to acquire some technology to help you meet these requirements, and so you would log that acquisition and plan for that acquisition and deployment on your system POEM. Okay, so as you were logging tools, documents, and assessing the controls, you were marking things as failed or putting things on your POEM to track them. So your FutureFeed POEM over here should now have some POEM items. And then after that, you would start building projects to engage the correct people to get the work done and become compliant. And then over here under deliverables is where you can run some reports and start reporting on status and compliance management things. Okay, so that's kind of our recommended approach as far as populating FutureFeed. So that way, once you get all that data in there, it does take some time to, log your technology and log the tools and the documents. But once FutureFeed is set up, then you're going to really start to be able to manage compliance get things done, system flaws or non-compliance remediated, and then also it helps you with managing compliance throughout the next 3 years. Okay, so once you get assessed or you get your certification, in 3 years, you're going to have to be reassessed and um, recertified. And so throughout those 3 years, you're going to have to be doing things per NIST 800-171 or CMMC to remain compliant. For example, like annual security control assessments or, um, weekly or monthly vulnerability scans, access control reviews, all those things. In FutureFeed, you're going to create recurring tasks and assign them to individuals so that way the things that have to happen throughout the year, they are completed and that activity is logged in FutureFeed and it's associated with the requirements. And then that evidence that is logged when you mark something complete is associated with the requirements. And now you're going to have evidence um, of all of your compliance activity throughout the years to display and show assessors in FutureFeed. Okay. So before I go over the dashboard area, I just want to show you a couple sources you have where you can get some answers. Um, If you are logged into FutureFeed, you scroll down to the bottom. There's 2 links here. The first link, FutureFeed training. You're probably going to recognize this page because this is where you went to sign up for this class, training 1. So here's where you're going to go to sign up for training 2. And you can sign up for these as many times as you need. Some people are just getting started with the tool when they first sit in this session. So they don't have too many questions. But then once you start getting, working in the tool and populating the tool with the data and setting it up to help you manage your compliance program, you may have a lot more questions. And so feel free to sign up for any of these sessions where you can ask your questions. Okay, so another resource you have is back in FutureFeed, scroll to the bottom, this 15 minutes with FutureFeed session. This is a weekly open office hours, essentially. Every Thursday, I host a 30-minute session where anybody from FutureFeed can join and ask me questions about FutureFeed. If you need some help with something in FutureFeed or some guidance, just join that session and ask. Other resources you have is most pages in FutureFeed. For example, here I'm on corporate data in the start area. So these getting started guides here, this is like a built-in user manual. Okay, so if I click on this, it's going to show me the getting started corporate data information, related information. So what is corporate data? Why are you collecting this information? How to fill out this section? We provided some compliance implications from like an assessor's point of view or CMMC compliance point of view in the next 2 sections here. But this is all just about corporate data. So what you're going to see in these getting started guides here is just it pertains to the page you're on. So if I go over to scope, now if I click on it, I'm going to see information about the scope section and what is the scope and how to define your scope. Okay. So check out these getting started guides and you'll have to be in the correct section of FutureFeed to get your answer. All right. Other resources you have is in the top right of the page, user settings. Click on Help Center here, and you will have to make an account for this website. It's free. It's a FutureFeed website, but try to be signed in when you come to this website because you'll have access to more resources that we didn't want to be publicly available. So this is where you're going to find any knowledge base or articles that we've posted, videos, how-tos, pretty much any questions that we get in the help desk in our help desk. If we get the question a lot, then we turn it into a knowledge base article and post it here. So you can get some answers here. Again, that's top right corner, user icon, help center. And then the last thing you can do if you need some answers is always email support@futurefeed.co, or not .co, let's see. Yeah, .co. Support@futurefeed.co. So you can always email us and you'll initiate a help desk ticket. They'll route it to the right team and get you an answer. All right, with that being said, I'm going to just go over the dashboard area, start people, tools, documents, and stop there. The second session, then we will cover assess, SSP, POAM, and deliverables. Feel free to interrupt me along the way. So the dashboard area. You have compliance dashboards. So this is just a nice, semi-interactive chart displaying level of compliance. You can drill down to the objective level and see where you have some failures that need to be worked on. Just some metrics here on status, inheritance, last poem date. Okay. Next is the Assessment Prep Center. So this is a recent addition to FutureFeed, and I'll try my best to show you how this works. All right, so I'm going to click on another section of FutureFeed. It really doesn't matter any section. You have this compliance review box. So this compliance review box here, if I click on tools, here's tools and the SSP, it's everywhere, right? Most sections in FutureFeed are going to have this compliance review box here. Now we added it because one, like I said, your system security plan is being generated with, it's pulling together a lot of the information you've put into FutureFeed and it's generating your SSP. So if you have inaccurate information in FutureFeed, then when you export or run a system security plan report, it's going to have inaccurate information. Okay, so it's very important, especially when you're moving into a C3PAO assessment and you have to have an accurate system security plan, a system POAM, and some other reports. Then you're going to want to make sure that your FutureFeed environment, the information in it, is accurate. Okay. Also, it's your compliance management program tool, and so you're going to want to make sure that that information in the tool remains accurate and valid and is being maintained throughout the system lifecycle or the contract lifecycle. And occasionally, you might want to have some approval of that information. Maybe you have an annual review and approval process in your company, right? So we've provided this little box here. And it relates, you can see the information for every page over here under the Assessment Prep Center. Okay. So if I click on the Contract Manager page right here, it's going to bring me to the Contract Manager section of FutureFeed. And so maybe, let me clear this out, but not everyone at your company may know what your cage code is or your cage codes are. They may not know the different contracts that your company has and the contract, start stop dates and the different clauses that are present in that contract, right? So you might want to assign this page the responsibility to populate this page, and maintain this page. You might want to assign that to someone at your company that does know about your company contracts and the cage codes, maybe a contracting, officer or a program manager. So you can assign this section of FutureFeed to that individual. Let's say it's Jill is my contracting officer. Okay. And then Jill can be responsible for filling out this data and reviewing it. So whoever clicks this box, it will log that they reviewed that page. Okay, so Jill would have to be the one logged in to click the box and populate the information. It's displaying my name because I'm the one who did it. All right, and then also Jill or someone else, if you have someone else at your company that wants to approve the different pages, maybe a security officer, they can approve those that section of FutureFeed. Okay, so if I go back to my assessment prep center and contract information, now it's been approved by me today, September 2nd. Okay. So you can see like this page here has only been assigned to Jill, these no assignments. So you can see all of the important pages in FutureFeed listed out here, assign out responsibility for populating that section, track that it gets reviewed and approved. And you can reset these all. You know, we would recommend resetting them. Like if you have an annual an annual review and approval cycle, then you would reset each, you know, when you're done with that cycle and prior to moving into the next cycle. Critical dates, this is another project management tool where you can just identify the CMMC process for your company. When you start working on the, you know, preparing for the assessment and implementing and self-evaluating the NIST 800-171 requirements. When do you plan to have that actual assessment? Okay, once you do have that assessment, if you had any findings, you're going to have 180 days to remediate and reevaluate those findings, certain findings. And then after you get your certification is good for 3 years, right? So when do you need to start prepping for that next assessment? So you can track goal dates and actual completed dates. And then as you click the this little circle over here, I think it's a radial. Is that the so give it a second here. What it's doing is FutureFeed is it's generating my system security plan and it's creating a snapshot of my SSP. Okay, so you can track your progress and view snapshots of your SSP throughout your project. So over here, you'd see hopefully improvement in score, you know, from negatives to positive 110. All right, here, the next two sections, team responsibilities and individual responsibilities. This is where you're going to see everything that's assigned to everyone in FutureFeed, essentially. So myself, in my FutureFeed environment, I set this as my default view here. So when I log into FutureFeed, it immediately brings me to my individual responsibilities page. These are all of the things that I have assigned to me. These are all my to-dos, all my tasks, all my responsibilities, right? Shows me all of everything that I'm assigned for the requirements, you know, RACI model-wise, tools and services, any tasks that I have ongoing or assigned to me, past due, and then any poems. If you want to see everyone else in your team and their assignments, you can click over here under team responsibilities, select that individual, and then you can see that individual's RACI responsibilities, tasks, and poem items. Okay. Something to mention here in the top right corner, user settings, my preferences. Actually, yeah, my preferences. So here is where you can get email or set up email notifications. When you receive new assignments or anything due, overdue, about to be past due emails, reminders. Okay, any questions on the dashboard page? Okay. So moving on, start. All right, just go over this. A lot of these sections here are pretty self-explanatory. And again, if you check out these getting started notes here, really it gives you some good information about how to fill out the information and why it's important to capture this information. So company data here, pretty self-explanatory: logo, company, contact information, address. Down here, you have a place to define your company's approach to handling risk. Okay, are you risk neutral, tolerant, accepting, very adverse? You try to remediate and address everything. You don't have like to have a lot of risks accepted or operating with a lot of risks. Okay, so check out the green dots along the way. Not only do we have the getting started guides up here, but important information that, we wanted to try to display to users in the interface directly. We added these green dots along the way. Again, these were developed because there was a lot of commonly asked questions about things, and so before my time, someone had added these in. All right, so how you'll use this information is when you start working within your system POAM and you're trying to prioritize remediation work, right? If you have 100 POAM items and you have a small team, not everything is going to be fixed or worked on right away. You're going to have to plan out your remediation efforts, and typically you're going to remediate things that have greater risk or greater impact to the company, right? So let's see, company description, again, pretty self-explanatory. Just describing the company. Do you have an IT cyber budget and a place to identify and track cybersecurity insurance coverage dates? Location, okay, here's where you're starting to identify the physical locations that are in scope of your requirements. So you could think of it as you're starting to define your system scope here in FutureFeed. It's here where you identify locations, and then under tools is where you're going to identify your technology assets. So any physical locations that you are responsible for, managing or implementing the requirements at, you would log those here. Just hit add, provide the red, this is the required information, okay, and then hit save. After you create that location record or location entry, then it's going to create this whole folder system. So now for this one location headquarters, you can track a bunch of metadata and just compliance related information. So who's responsible, accountable, consultant, informed for this location. You can upload documents. So maybe you have a floor plan or a facility layout plan, or maybe you're renting that location from someone. So there's some agreements in place. You can upload that documentation that will be needed. Under connect, this is where you're starting to associate the record, in this case, a location, with the requirements. Okay, you're starting to build out that body of evidence that you need to have. You're painting a picture of your whole compliance program. And so you could see the requirements that I associated with this entry is the 3.10 requirements, the physical security requirements. Okay, so we'll cover this connect feature here more when I get to the tools and documents. But yep, for this location, you'll connect it to the requirements. You have other other information you can track. This is where you start creating assignments for building out your compliance program or getting compliant or maintaining compliance. Okay, you can see some of the tasks here. Annual physical security audits. These are things like if you have things that you have to do throughout the year or on a recurring cycle, then create a new task, give the task a title. Definitely recommend creating some notes or some instructions and assigning that task to a role or a person, setting a due date if it's one time, or making things repeat. So here, this repeating this being able to make tasks repeat in FutureFeed is, in my opinion, a very, very, I mean, it's such a little thing, but it's huge when it comes to managing compliance because, like I said, you're going to have to do things. It's not one and done. You're going to have to continuously implement and continuously verify and evaluate if these requirements are being implemented throughout the year. So, being able to set up those alerts and get the appropriate people um, alerted when there's something that needs to be done, as well as track that activity in FutureFeed is essential. Sorry, I was trying to close that. And I don't know why it opens my email. Okay. So other things we did looks like, if you have a quarterly physical security control audit, but also one-time tasks, right? If this is your first time and you're just starting to work with NIST 800 171, or you're just, working on implementing these requirements or evaluating implementation, you may have tasks that look like, provide me the facility layout diagram. Just one time, don't repeat things that need to be done to help me set up my compliance management program or um, provide that evidence related to the requirements. Okay. Oh, sorry. Last section is the evidence. So when you mark things complete in FutureFeed, like if I wanted to upload a diagram here, if I wanted to close out this task of providing a facility layout diagram, let's say it was assigned to me, then I'm going to click on that task. And what's great about FutureFeed is you can't mark something complete without, providing the evidence that it was completed. So as you're noticing here, I clicked on the task and now it's saying, do I want to attach a document or attach some evidence that shows I completed that task? Do I want to link it? Maybe it's SharePoint or somewhere else. I'll just provide a link. Or if I click on new document, it's actually going to open up a blank Word document and I'll type up my report or type up some notes about that activity. So in this case, let's say I'm going to just upload a diagram. Let's pretend that that's my diagram. Okay. And now I hit save, complete. It's going to ask me to sign, diagram attached, mark complete. Notice now I was in the task assignment area and give it a second. Now it kicks me over to evidence. So when you mark tasks as complete, they're going to be removed from here. And then you'll see them over here. It's completed activity. Here's the one I just marked complete, and it shows that there's an attachment. So now I can click on it, and there's my image, my evidence. And this evidence here, or really any of this evidence here under this tab here, is always going to be associated with the requirements, meaning you're building out that body of evidence, because over here under the connect area is where I've called out which requirements I have associated. So now this evidence of a facility layout diagram is going to be found and viewable by any internal or external assessors when they're looking at the 310 controls, because they can open up this location entry and view this evidence. It all stays tied together. Okay. So locations, add location, FCI locations, CUI locations. If I commonly get asked, should I log any cloud locations here? Like if you're in GCC, GCC High, should you log the Microsoft data center locations here? My recommendation is no. Those locations, you don't need to log and track them as closely as you do maybe locations you're responsible for, because that's all inherited and covered under FedRAMP. So I would not document those locations here. I would document that shared responsibility or external service provider engagement under tools, under online, and maybe some vendors. I'd talk about that there. Okay, so Locations, all right. Maintenance and ownership, this is where you're just defining at a high level who maintains, who owns that hardware, software in your environment. And you can check out the getting started guides over here, compliance implications, where we've provided you an example of how to maybe address that field if you need some guidance. Anything with asterisk here, you see this? This means that this information is going to be displayed in your system security plan. This information is being captured and will show in your SSP report. Scope, system information, defining the system, giving it a unique identifier or a name, uh, describing your system boundary. That's really important. That comes into play when you're talking about your assessment scope and you're engaging with a C3PAO. Contracts, this is where you're logging cage code or cage codes associated with this environment, essentially stating that the information processed for that contract is being processed within this system environment, okay? And this system is meeting NIST 800-171. So then down here also, this is where you're logging your contracts. And for compliance perspective, the important piece is what clauses are present in those contracts that are requiring me to implement NIST 800-171 or CMMC. Data inventory, this is where you're defining FCI and CUI assets. So under the FCI data inventory, it's fairly simple. When you go up to tools and you log your technology, then you'll have to come back to your FCI data inventory and it's going to show you a list of your technology that you've logged. And then you just mark yes or no for which ones are FCI assets. Okay, Active Directory, no, it's not FCI asset. Data storage, yes, I have FCI there. So yes or no. CUI data inventory looks a lot different, okay? Here we're listing out all of the NARA CUI categories and we hyperlink to them. So if I click on this ammonia nitrate, it's going to bring me to the CUI repository and tell me about CUI, right? And note here, this is just some like information I want to call out here that you may want to know is whether it's basic or specified. So in this case, CUI ammonium nitrate is a specified category of CUI. So it's specified, and so that means you're going to have specific CUI marking requirements. It's going to start with CUI/SP dash. That means specified. This part the SP means specified. So you'll have to visit this to figure out your marking requirements. I'm sure you guys know you have to mark your CUI data. There's a requirement in the 3.8 family that talks about marking. And so over here under FutureFeed, so under ammonium nitrate, you have basic CUI basic or CUI specified. In this case, we would only check this box. If my company had CUI ammonium nitrate data, then it's CUI specified. I'm going to check this box. This tells me, let me clear out some of this other, right? Just looking at this, it tells me, a compliance person or maybe an external assessor, that somewhere in this environment, CUI specified data, specifically ammonium nitrate, is stored, processed, or transmitted. Okay. Now, what you can do a step further is associate technology. You can associate specific technology as storing, processing, or transmitting that information. So you would probably associate your CUI assets. Okay. So, and that's when this wrench is going to show up that you see over here. Now to do that, you actually have to be in the technology entry. Okay. So let me go to a technology, maybe like, do we have any database? Something that stores data. Let's pretend this. Oh, look, this REL 7. Let's pretend it's a database. Okay. Over here under compliance is where I categorize my asset. And right now it's categorized correctly. So it does have to be on a CY asset category. And if it, once you select that, then down here, this CY icon is clickable. And you would click on this and select ammonium nitrate. Now, I'll just show you if you marked it a security protection asset, meaning it's not storing, processing, or transmitting CUI data, but it is protecting CUI assets and CUI data and helping you implement NIST 800-171 requirements. But anyway, this, if you select that, see, I can't click down here. Okay, so it does have to be correctly categorized, and then this field will be enabled. Now, if I go under here and I click this box, ammonium nitrate, if I go back to my data inventory section, ammonium nitrate no longer has just a check in the box, and now calls out a specific asset. Let me click on it. And should be my rel. Okay. So up to you on how you want to use it. Do you want to just check the box? Yes, somewhere in this environment, this is the data we're processing, storing, transmitting, and the data we're trying to protect. Or you could use this page to really depict your CUI data flow. It could help you with scoping your environment if you still haven't done that. So we do make it's up to you on how you'd like to use it, but you can get real granular if you'd like. Sensitive data information. This is simply just for some of our clients who wanted to track other data other than FCI and CUI in this environment for maybe other auditing or regulations that they have to meet. Settings, you can enable FutureFeed. You can integrate it with your ticketing system. So just enable and then put your ticketing system's email there. You see FutureFeeds is here. And so now when this is enabled, where you're going to see this capability is over up if I go into my system POAM, and you see how there's this envelope here icon. This is me sending an email from FutureFeed to my ticketing system. So I'm updating a POAM item. Okay, we provided this capability because we realized there's a lot of companies or external service providers that already are using a ticketing system to track and report on issues or system flaws. And so you can send those updates to your ticketing system if you're using that for project management. Okay, POAM goals. When in FutureFeed, if you create a POAM for something, it's going to come pre-populated with a default due date, and this is how you control. So if I created a POAM today, the default due date is going to be 3 quarters out. So you can control that. Now you can always edit the date when you create the POAM or at a later time, but it will not be blank. And then here, organizational scale, impact, effort, cost. This is where your think of it a way as you're standardizing language. Okay, depending on the size of your company, but let's say, you're 100, 200 employee company, and you may have a few people helping you manage compliance or manage FutureFeed. And there may be several people that are creating POAM entries, okay? And if that's the case, then if you have multiple people logging system flaws or identifying system issues, then when you log a POAM, let me show you. Let me go. We'll do it under a tool. Over here, if I create a POAM entry, okay, it's going to ask me what's the issue, what's the system flaw, what's the vulnerability or non-compliance that we have to remediate. And then what's the impact, effort, and cost? Well, impact, effort, and cost may mean something, to HR different than IT, different than operations. Okay, so think of it as like when you go to the doctor and they're like, what's your pain level? And they have that chart on the wall. That's because they want everybody's pain scale to be the same reference. Okay, so you're just defining that scale of impact, effort, and cost for your company. Over here under start, so that way, when other people that do need to make poem items and provide impact, effort, costs, they know they have a good scale and reference point. Okay, so for a company, uh, a small company, a low cost item may be $500, but for a large company, a low cost item may be $5,000. Okay, so set your scale here, you define it here, and then anybody can reference it up here in the top right. You see this ruler here? So you can reference your organizational scale here or set it there as well. Okay, people, like I said, this is where you're logging users, roles, and teams. Under users, you do have to be a system admin and you can add new user. And you have standard access, admin access, and assessor access. Standard is your compliance management team. Anybody that you're going to be assigning POAM or requirement, RACI responsibility. Think of, anybody that you're going to assign as responsible, accountable, consultant, informed. We recommend you give them access to your environment so that way you can really use the tasking feature and the communication features, the responsibility dashboards. So standard user is going to give someone basic access to your environment and they can do most standard things. Admin, you just one or two people at your company should be an admin. These are the people responsible for managing access to your account and contacting support or managing your subscription environment, that type of stuff. Assessor, you could use this for any internal or external assessors. Definitely external assessors, any C3PAOs that you engage. There's a lot of C3PAO companies who are willing to gain access to your FutureFeed environment and view your SSP and the data you have in FutureFeed directly because it's a lot easier to navigate and see how pieces of evidence relate to the requirements and who's responsible and who do I need to be interviewing and that type of stuff. So you would give them the assessor role, and then they're only going to have view only access to your SSP and the evidence. So highly recommend contacting your system admin and asking them to set up a assessor account for you just so you can log in as an assessor and get a feel for what the assessor is going to see and how they're going to navigate your compliance program or the requirements and the evidence. No access. So why this is even a thing is in FutureFeed, if you want to, let's say you want to assign your CEO as accountable for everything, right? Ultimately, your CEO is accountable for implementing a NIST 800-171. This is just example. So, but you don't want your CEO to maybe log into FutureFeed. They're not going to be doing the work, right? So they don't need actual access to FutureFeed. But in the tool, in FutureFeed, you want to be able to tag your CEO by name or role as responsible, accountable, consultant, informed on something. To do that, you'll have to essentially create a record for that individual, but don't give them access to your environment. Okay. Defining the roles over here, just add new role, define the role, and then down here, find the role that you define, assign person to the role. See this list of people here? I had to log them under users first. So if I want to be able to select someone here, make sure you've created them an account or a no access account. And in FutureFeed, we recommend to the best of your ability, when you assign responsibility, do try to assign responsibility to a role or a team because that's going to help with personnel turnover. For example, if Jill is currently my incident response team lead. And so under the assess area, under my incident response requirements, I've assigned Jill, I guess a couple ways you could see it's funny, but we've given Jill either responsible or accountable because she's the incident response team lead, okay? Well, if Jill leaves the company and she quits, instead of having to go log into FutureFeed and reassign everything to someone else, if you use the role or team way, then all you got to do is come in here, change out her name. All right, Bart is now taking on incident response team lead responsibilities. And so just by changing his name here, now when Bart logs into FutureFeed, he's going to see everything that Jill was working on. He'll be assigned now as responsible under the requirements. Let's see. I'm not sure how it was applied, but see, we had Jill's name over here, but now it's Bart's name over here. Bart's now responsible and Jill's been removed. Okay, so do try to assign responsibility to a role or a team. So that way, when you do have personnel changes or turnover, you don't have to worry about reassigning tasks or poem items or all that work. Teams, similar, like let's say HR, okay, click on the add or remove members. Well, Carrie just left the company, and so we're going to remove her, and now maybe we hired Mina. Mina's our new HR rep, okay? So now anybody who's part of this HR team will see all of the responsibilities assigned to that team. So personnel onboarding, offboarding, access requests, the personnel screening, the typical requirements that HR implements or enforces in the company. Now they're going to see all those assignment of responsibility. Okay. But under roles, you're just defining your roles. You can add new role, define it, and then or you can use our default roles here. If you don't want to use them, just mark them not applicable. Manage teams, yours is going to be blank. You can add new teams manually, or you can use our populate button. What we've done with the populate is we've built out teams and we've assigned them responsibility already. Just, we know someone who's on a configuration management team is going to be helping with configuring all these requirements. Or we know, training team. Maybe you don't actually have someone that's done maybe you don't actually have a training team at your company, but you decide to use training team because it's already associated with these 4 requirements that talk about training people. Okay. So you would just click yes, use that team, and then go find the team. It will be blank. Let's see. Here we go. It'll be blank. Go find the team and then start adding people to that team. And those are the people that are going to be doing training for your compliance efforts. Okay. Any questions on people? And I'm running out of time, so I apologize. But tools and documents is next, and it's fairly how to get started. What I'm about to say is applicable to both tools and documents. Okay, under tools, this is where you're logging your technology. So think about the CMMC asset categories. Okay, you have CY assets, SPA, CRMA, and specialized assets, and even out of scope. So log anything that fits this categorization in your environment, because this is what you're doing. You're defining your assessment scope as far as technology here under tools. Okay, so under tools, this isn't where you're gonna, like, let's say you have 50 Windows 11 user endpoints. You're not gonna log all 50. You don't need to create 50 entries for that. No, you just create one. Windows 11, Windows 10, whatever, and just one entry. Okay. The only time maybe you create 2 entries for, let's say, Windows 10 is maybe you have different baseline configurations. Maybe you have a software development team, and so the approved baseline for their endpoints is going to look different than maybe the approved baseline for your HR team. You know, they're going to have different software, different ports, protocols, functions that they need to have open and configured in their baseline config. Okay. So in situations like that, then maybe you do make two entries and you title one Windows 11 HR team and then Windows 11 software dev team, something. Okay. So I'm just trying to say this is not where you're logging your whole asset inventory or your whole software inventory. This is where you track different IT products, different technologies, and different configuration baselines and images of your technology is in this tools and services. So you'll just hit add. Mission is like, what's the perfect purpose? You know, is it a firewall? Is it a user endpoint? Is it an MFA, Active Directory, server? So what's the mission? What's the brand or and then is it on-prem or in the cloud or is it managed and provided by a service provider? Okay, so just hit log. After you hit plus, then it creates the whole folder system like I showed you. So now you'll open up that entry and now for that one piece of technology, you have a bunch of information you can capture, as well as tasks to start setting up and evidence to house. So here I have a firewall, and here's all the people responsible, accountable, consulted for this firewall. Looks like it's managed by an external service provider. So we have a CRM connected to this firewall. So if any external service providers have some shared responsibility with managing the firewall, or maybe they're providing firewall services and they do all of the work, you know, here's where you're going to associate shared responsibility matrices with this asset. Connect. I'm going to start connecting all of the requirements to this asset. Not only does my firewall help me enforce some requirements throughout my boundary, but it itself has to implement some of the technical requirements. Okay, so like 318. My firewall, unsuccessful logon attempts. My firewall administrative console, you know, has been configured to limit unsuccessful logon attempts locally. Okay. It's so that's why I've connected 318. My firewall is not enforcing the limit of logon attempts everywhere else in my environment. It's just picking it up on itself. Now, but my firewall is helping me external connections, 3120, you see. There's under 3120, it says limit and verify external connections. So yes, my firewall is helping me implement that requirement because it's setting up my access control rules and monitoring, okay? So start connecting the requirements, and when you connect a requirement, then that item is now going to be found under the requirement in the assess area. You're building out that body of evidence. So I do have to wrap up the conversation here, and let's kind of wrap it up. So if you're just getting started with FutureFeed, I do recommend starting with start, filling out much of the data. Filling out as much data as you can. Now, there's going to be some data missing, or you have to go ask the right people, or maybe you need to engage the right people and have them fill out that data. So you don't have to, get one section of FutureFeed 100% of the way done before moving on. Move on if you can, but start here and start populating and working on filling out this data. Then go on to people, define your users, roles, and teams involved. Go over to technology and start logging your technology, and that's just by hitting the plus. Note, though, that you do have active, and down here you have pending, okay? So if I add something up here under active, that means it's in production. I'm using it today, okay? No issues. But down here, if I'm planning to acquire that tool or I'm planning to push that tool production, so anything that I want to put track, this is now when I log it here, it's now on my system POAM, okay? But don't worry if you forgot to if you log something in the wrong place, just open up the asset entry. And up here you have active and pending, and this is where you can change between putting something on your POAM or not having it on your system POAM. After you log a technology, whether it's active or pending, we recommend opening up that entry, assigning responsibility and accountability at the very least. And then over here, connect it to the requirements at the very least. Then you can work on coming back and starting to fill out the rest of this data and set up your task and start building out your evidence. But when you're first setting up FutureFeed, log the technology, assign responsibility and accountability, and associate it with the requirements. So that way you can start evaluating your implementation and seeing where you have gaps. Same thing with documents. Over here, this is where you're going to log all your security documentation. You have active documents. These are things that my company currently follows and enforces. Then you have pending documents. These are the things where you're planning, things are still in draft and being worked on. Just add what is it that you're logging, give it a name, and then when you add, it creates that whole folder system. So again, at the very least, we recommend going in here and assigning responsibility and accountability and start connecting this document to all the requirements. And then come back and start filling out some of the other data and setting up tasks and working on collecting evidence. If you want to use some or get access to the FutureFeed templates, click on this populate button. This is where we're going to list all of the FutureFeed provided templates. We have 57. And so here's where, like, if you don't have a visitor log and you want to use one, then just hit copy. Let's say I don't also have an acceptable encryption policy. I want to use that one. Create. Okay, and now I've just created a whole folder for that document. Now if I find it, what was it? Visitor. Let me refresh the page here. It's going to probably be under references, visitor. And there it is, visitor log, okay? So if I click on it now, this live document is now going to have that template. So that's if you want to use the templates that FutureFeed has available to you. Of course, you would then edit it and tailor that template to really fit your environment. Publish. In here, you're tracking version and history and having access to more templates. All right, any questions? Looks like we lost a couple of people. I've gone over a few minutes. Are there any questions? Nothing? Okay, well, thanks for your time. As soon as, give it about an hour, hour and a half, and then you're going to get a link to this recording. And feel free to contact support or join this session again in the future if you need more help. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yep, bye.